NATO is debating its future direction, or so-called strategic concept, but while looking forward, it's also looking back at what was written originally in 1949.
If there is anything inevitable in the future, it is the will of the people of the world for freedom and for peace.
Discussions have turned to the key function. An attack on one is an attack on all, or the so-called Article 5. How important will Article 5 be in finalising NATO's new strategic concept?
I think it's very important to understand what Article 5 says. We're not here in an exercise of changing any of the wording of the treaty. And the treaty, all 14 articles, 23 sentences, is a remarkable document of remarkable clarity. The question that I think we all face is, what do these words that were written 60 years ago mean in the very different world that we live today?
Article 5, with all new threats including, but not forgetting the old ones, must remain the core objective of the alliance.
Well, Article 5 is the centerpiece of NATO itself. Therefore, it's also the centerpiece of the new strategic concept, because that's what all NATO is all about. NATO is a political military defense alliance, and it's just necessary to ask defense against whom and defense against what. And there the allies have different views, and that's why the debate on Article 5 is key of the entire process.
Some suggest that keeping the strategic concept as narrow and as specific as possible is the best way forward. Others, however, suggest that with so many new threats and with the changing environment, it would be best if the strategic concept was broad and as wide as possible.
It appears that the consensus is moving towards keeping Article 5 fairly narrow. At the end of the day, an armed attack we'll recognize it when we see it.
For us to find the right balance around the Article 5, that means Article 5 based operations and out-of-area operations are probably the most important element in the new strategic concept.
And whilst during the strategic concept there will be lots of talk of future threats such as climate change, there are also many other people who remember vividly what life was like just 20 years ago in Central and Eastern Europe, and they wonder, have those threats really fully gone away?
The war in Georgia in the summer of 2008 seems only to have polarised opinions.
What has happened in August 2008 with the war in Georgia is that a schism of sorts opened in NATO. But essentially, the debate, and it's very clearly evidenced and mirrored in the discussions on the strategic concept to date, is whether we should focus almost exclusively on Afghanistan and tailor our defense equipment guidance, our budgetary guidance, our force structure, our command structure, to be able to fight Afghanistan-style wars, or whether we should continue preparing for a more conventional attack, a territorial attack on a NATO territory.
The events of August 2008 changed the security situation in Europe, because here we have, an attack, the first incident of that type taking place on Europe's doorstep since the breakup of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War. So I think it's a factor that needs to be played into the considerations of the new strategic concept.
Well, clearly our historic experience and recent events in the eastern part of Europe have shown that conventional threats are still there. Their probability is clearly low, but in the case of conventional threats, even a low probability event must be addressed.
The more the allies in Central and Eastern Europe and in Northern Europe, those who are most worried about Russia, the more they feel they are not getting the proper support from NATO on their biggest warring, Russia, the more they'll find it difficult to justify spending money, resources and lives on Afghanistan, because their own publics will ask them, why are we there and why isn't the alliance doing for us what we're doing for others?
And all of this debate takes place against the backdrop of the worst financial crisis in decades. That doesn't just mean that people have got less money to spend in bars, it also means that governments have much smaller budgets to play with. Defence budgets are expected to be hit particularly hard, and what that means is the next strategic concept will have to make some hard decisions about priorities.
The debate on the new strategic concept always promised differences of opinion. That was, in part, the point of the exercise, and these differences have already clearly surfaced.
It is probably one of the most divisive issues right now in NATO, how Russia is seen. And Russia is not always helpful taken an effort to avoid this impression. We have NATO allies who see it as a partner. We have also allies who see it as a problem. Not aggressively, but Russia might go down the drain economically or with regard to stability.
Clearly, there are differences in the alliance. There are differences within countries. That's what democracies are all about. We talk about them, we debate them, and openly we try to arrive at a new way in which more and more of us can agree. That's what democracy is about. We can't hide our differences. We should expose them. In fact, by exposing them, we may be able to find new ways in which we can work together and move forward.
But even with these differences of opinion, there is widespread agreement in NATO that Russia, and working with Russia, remains crucial.
I don't think that anybody must give up the process of engaging Russia, trying to do that in a very practical way. And I think we are able to identify a number of issues we can work on together.
There are things where we clearly need Russia, and we shall be able to work with Russia. Demonization of Russia or of any other country is of no help.
Well, we have long agreed that Russia is not a threat. We signed the 1997 Founding Act, which says that we do not regard each other as adversaries. So I don't think the strategic concept is going to look at who threatens us in terms of countries. I think what the strategic concept is going to look at is what's the international environment in which the alliance operates today? What are the challenges that confront the member states? And how are the member states best positioned to deal with those challenges?
A lot depends on the actions of Russia as well, whether Russia really wants to be a true partner of NATO. I mean, Latvia would very much support the fact that it would be, a reliable and predictable partner of the alliance. However, when we look at what's actually happening in Russia recently, then there are obviously some doubts about the reliability of Russia as a partner. But we think it's very important that that the alliance should engage Russia wherever possible.
So what does Russia think of this? Igor Jurgens is a foreign policy advisor to Russian President Medvedev.
We are the country on the borders of which we have three supergiants: European Union, United States and China. So to play in this triangle sometimes, if somebody is unfriendly, gives you better chances than. If we finally agree on principles, values and interests with the United States and Europe on a number of issues, then China, who will always be a great player, will be of less importance in this cooperation because we're not Chinese.
And he is confident that Russia's path will converge rather than conflict with the West's.
Western Europe, which is probably 50 years ahead in terms of civilization development of Russia, has more developed values. But basically, the value of the family, don't steal, love your children, love your country, all of those basic 10 commandments, we have the same. Reflections are different. So at the moment, we place a little bit more of an emphasis on the interests, okay, because the values are a little bit more developed and refined in your part of the world and less in my part of the world. But then I think they will converge.
The strategic concept could also give greater clarity on where, when and why NATO launches its operations.
We must have criteria and principles for our operations. I think it would make our life easier and back home in dealing with our governments, with our parliaments, with our political partners, social partners and so on, because each of these operations has severe and important impact back at home.
There is a tendency to get involved in things that are without end, and it's not a wise approach, even with a UN mandate, with broadest possible international support, as in the case of Afghanistan. We see that we are stuck, and we don't find always the support we need, both within NATO as well as outside.
And support, in both resources and political will, is going to be vital for the next strategic concept to be a success.
I think in this context, I would define that a strategy as a kind of mindset forward for the NATO country regarding security aspects. Now, if you then have words which either you cannot execute or you have not the budgets, that's a useless strategy.
We must be realistic and realistically ambitious, what I say. At the same time, it's also about our reliability. Whenever we accept a challenge or a commitment, we must know we are able to deliver.
If you say, we will take care of all major security situations in the world and that's our vocation, then let's from the very beginning decide what will be the resource.
You cannot create solidarity on a piece on paper. You have to live it and you have to execute it, but the piece of paper can help a little bit.